More on the dollhouse. The talk of this video is going to be the basics of how to put together the shell of your dollhouse. Again, I'm building a Victorian style dollhouse, very ornate. You don't have to go that extreme. You can make, basically a bookshelf and call it a day. Call it a modern design home or something. You can make them to be, look just like your home if you want to. So, let's talk about basically how to put together, how I found to put together the shell. Alright, so you're going to want a thinner plywood, okay? You don't want it too thin that it's all floppy and it won't stay straight and it warps very easily. So I went with this stuff. And a little bit thinner stuff you can see on the window here. For some reason I bought two different thicknesses of plywood. They're both 3-ply. You can see the layers, 1, 2, 3. It's 3-ply. For some reason this one is thicker than the ones I originally started with on the sides. I think the thinner stuff like this is a good idea because it'll decrease the overall weight of the dollhouse, which is good. But this thicker stuff is nicer because obviously it's thicker and it'll hold up a little bit better, especially when you have these larger load-bearing surfaces. You can always brace it up like I did in these corners, and it kind of looks gross now, but I will, figure out a way to hide that and blend it in when I'm done. But for stuff like those floors where it spans, a large area like this, especially with, bigger dolls like Barbies or Monster High dolls, you're going to want a thicker material so it doesn't, sag, because that doesn't really look good if it sags. About sagging, with these thinner woods, they are not going to stay nice and straight. They warp very easily. If you set them up on the end, they're going to warp on you. Don't cry. You can fix it. You can work a warp in your project and straighten it out as you go. So I've learned how to do that building this dollhouse. Some things that you're gonna want, if you don't have a big panel saw, most of you don't, you can build them. Pinterest is an excellent site for teaching how to do a lot of carpentry things like build your own panel saw. If you don't know what a panel saw is, it's basically a big table that you put a full sheet of plywood on, and it cuts super straight lines down through the middle. One of the solutions that I found out, and let me turn this light so I can show you guys. It's kind of glaring into the camera. So this dealie right here is called a door board, and I designed this one so that it is the full width of a piece of plywood. And this yellow part is where my circular saw rides on. It's a sled, and the blade cuts right up against this edge. I actually cut that nice and straight with my blade, riding it up against the straight edge. There's a little lip in here that the sled, the plate of your saw rides against. And then I built in these other little flat parts that are about even with this part so that I can put clamps on there and clamp it down to the board so I don't have it sliding all over the place. A consideration, I had to do this like ridiculous extra stuff because I was going to clamp that down there, and then I realized the motor hangs over the end. You can design it differently. This is how I did it. It's a home project. It's going to take some practice. There's videos out there, and look up how to build a door board, and there'll be all kinds of videos. This is how I decided to do it. Most of it was scrap wood. But it helps me get nice straight cuts on panels, and that is important because if you don't get nice straight cuts out of your big sheet of plywood, nothing you cut after that is going to be square. I have a very nice Porter cable, circular saw with a laser on it, and the laser is really good. I snap the chalk line and put the laser on the chalk line, and it cuts very straight. It does not cut straight enough. The door board is pretty much like having your own panel saw. You can, if you don't want to build a door board, you can go to Lowe's and they have a panel saw in the back of the lumber section, and they will cut it, your panels down into the size that you want. I like to be able to make those bigger cuts on my own when I want to, as wide as I want to. You know, I usually cut them into 2 foot by 4 foot sections. There's my panels cut up. Those are pretty easy to work with, especially on a smaller table saw like this. A little contractor's table saw. Much easier to work with a smaller piece like that than a huge piece. So that's about that. Once you get them down into these pieces, you can easily cut out the pieces that you need for your dollhouse. So I started with these pieces. This is all one solid piece of plywood. I built 3 of them, and I made a mistake because I knew that I wanted to do this little tower end, you know, with this little extension, little bay window style extension. I don't know all the technical terms. You can look them up. There's weird names for them. The thing that I made a mistake on was that these I wanted to go all the way to the top and be flat, where just this one needed to be slanted for the roof. So I cut all 3 of them with the slant, and then I had to go back and make a repair. Now, yes, you're going to say this is shoddy because there's a big gap there. It's not even straight. But I'm going to tell you, you're not going to see it because I'm going to put siding over this whole thing. And I'm going to blend it in and hide it. Another thing I had to do to fix that, this is an insert, this whole piece here. And I had to cut these pieces to mimic what these pieces are doing so it looks even. So when I hide it, it all looks the same. I had to do the same thing over here. This piece is an insert. You can see it's thicker right there. And I didn't have to patch that part because the insert covered it up. Okay, so yeah, you build those three pieces, you cut those out. Cutting the doors out first was a good idea because now I don't have to go back and recut the doors. All right, so that was a good idea. Cutting the windows in the sides was not a good idea because I didn't leave a very good plan as to how I'm going to build a chimney. So I might, on at least one of these sides, or both, put inserts into those. And it's going to be extra work. It's going to be a huge pain in the butt. But I'll probably put in inserts in all of these and plug those windows and run siding over it so that I can make a chimney and little fireplaces and stuff. I had planned to make like this a library and this like the master bathroom and then the master bedroom up here with a little secret door entrance. It's going to be like a bookcase, a bookshelf, because it's going to be a library and then probably some bookshelves over here. But like a part of the bookshelf is going to swing open and be a secret entrance into the master suite, if you will. That's a little neat feature. You know, I'll make a video on that once I figure out how to do it and get to that point. Right now we're talking about the shell. So to brace the side pieces, I cut these little strips out of 5-ply plywood. It probably is a little thick, but I do like it. It adds extra rigidity, kind of gives it a nice little frame. This very thin plywood is very flexible without it, because I cut these little slots in here, and that kind of broke a little bit. I'll fix that. Cut these little slots in here up to the thin plywood with a table saw, which is a good idea. Basically, you set your fence for the height of your floor, and you run it all of the pieces through and cut out the same height using your fence. That's how you know. And I had to make multiple passes unless you have a dado blade to get the full thickness. I didn't have a dado blade, so I had to make multiple passes and move the fence like in small increments, make multiple cuts. It was a pain. Luckily, it kind of turned out okay. So that's one way to do it. If you don't have the fancy tools, you know, definitely work up to buying the fancy tools. But you know, I don't like unitaskers, so I don't have fancy tools. I have tools that do multiple purposes, and then I can, you know, rig to make do all of the things that I need it to do. All right, so that's the way to do that with the circular saw. So you're going to do that, you know, for all of these, or how I do it. If you want to use my process, go ahead. If you don't, you know, good for you. Again, cut out those slots, cutting these floor bits was hard because I decided to put the front on there first. I did this part first on the front, and then I decided not to do this part because if you make, and this is one of the reasons I built the door board, because I put one of these on here and had to rip it off. It wasn't straight. The floor pieces that I made all of the same size based on one slot did not fit into the other ones. And so you're gonna have to move them, you know, back and forth this way to have some wiggle room to slide these in possibly, because no matter how hard you try in carpentry, it's still never gonna be perfect. At least at my level. I'm not a master carpenter. So the base is another good part. I should have talked about that first. I used 4-ply plywood. Your selection of plywood, you can go for like furniture grade, really awesome stuff. I didn't see a need to, because I'm going to cover it all up with, you know, all kinds of stuff. There's going to be popsicle stick wood floors throughout the whole thing. I'm going to paper mache over all the joints. I'm going to put, use like wallpaper or wrapping paper, you know, to make the walls. I'm going to paint it up, you know, so you're not going to see any of this. It's going to be all smoothed over, basically like, you know, making a cake or something. So you want a good, thick, sturdy base. You do want that nice and flat. You don't want a warped up piece of junk base. I might even go with 5-ply, but at the time I had was 4-ply, and it was pretty much the correct size. On the sides, you want to leave a little lip, and then hang the lip over it and nail the side with a pneumatic nailer. This is my favorite tool. If you're building a dollhouse, you need a set of pneumatic pin nailers. Different sizes, different nails for each one, different lengths. Definitely get one. It's way better than having a clamp and trying to clamp this up and then, you know, smack it with a hammer, because these dollhouses can't really afford to be beat with a hammer. Pneumatic nailers are definitely a good tool. Another good tool for holding stuff together, at least temporarily until it's glued up, because I glued these strips on, is a staple gun. You can clamp it, you know, glue it, put it together, clamp it, staple gun it, take off your clamps. The glue will set. You can move on to the next piece. It allows you to move a little bit more efficiently. You know, once it's stapled down or nailed down with the pneumatic nailer, it's not going anywhere. You can take your clamps off, consider that a clamp. Keep moving on, do more work. So, you know, that's a way to make your clamps on your piece temporary. So we're back to, don't put the windows in the end. It's probably going to help me out. I got a laser level now, rotary laser level. I'll probably send it between this window and this window, and then I can mark out where all of the other windows need to go. If I didn't have a cool rotary laser that I got from Harbor Freight for like $60, pretty cheap, pretty awesome. You know, I would just measure this distance from the floor to up there. But again, if you have a saggy floor, your windows are going to be all off. It's not going to look right. So make sure your floor is nice and straight. If you're doing it that way, measure it off the bottom, draw a line, you know, mark off your windows where you want them. So I'm going to put those in. Between all of these panels, especially if you're doing wood, I've seen dollhouses made out of cardboard, and some of them look really legit. They look realistic, even though they're made out of cardboard. It's crazy. If you were doing cardboard, you could just paper mache all of your joints together. Just, you know, which if you don't know what paper mache is, that's good skill, I guess, especially if you want to, you know, play with your kids. You can have some pretty cool projects made out of paper mache. And if you were making one out of cardboard, a dollhouse out of cardboard, that's how you would glue the joints together. I don't like that. I feel like if it gets wet or humid, it'll just fall apart. So I use these wood strips, again, same idea as over here, something to nail into, something to support it. Cut all the joints. This 45 degrees, that's where your bread and butter is. Making 45 degree cuts is pretty awesome. You know, that's standard cuts. If you can work in your things 45 degrees all over the place, that's the easiest thing. So like for this rail, I did a strip with a 45 degree rip into there, glued it into the joint, I think I stapled it in there somehow, but I definitely pneumatic nailed it and called it a day. Nail it up, make it nice and straight, put the next panel on, nail that panel down, and keep moving. So, you know, that's a pretty easy process. So again, build these pieces first, put in your floors, okay? Make sure your floors are nice and straight, and then start putting up the big panels. I would do like I did these big panels first. These were much easier to cut. And then with these crazy angles, you want to save all your crazy angles for last if you can. Because as long as everything else is straight, measuring off of the things that you have already built to make these crazy things is much easier. It took a bit of doing and some math and calculating to be able to make this, to get the right lengths. Eventually, I just drew 45-degree lines out, and it just worked. I tried doing all the math, and it came down to just eyeballing it, and it worked out pretty well. These are also 45 degrees, which again, incorporate 45-degree angles in your stuff because it's the easiest thing to do. Unless you want to rack your brains out doing crazy trig because you're in love with math. And I'm in love with math and science, but sometimes it makes my brain hurt. So yeah, got to the point, the sides are on, that's front's on. I told you I skipped the math and just eyeballed it. I used my square, my speed square, made 45 degrees. Lines, measured off of those. I got these big panels made up. I put this panel and this panel on first, tacked it into these side posts and around the bottom. And then I put these pieces on here. I custom fit them to go between the floors. Okay, so that it would also support the floors back there. And then, nailed that into the sides from the outside there. And then I made the centerpiece. And then stuck that on there, glued it, and nailed it into these guys. A trick for that I found, because you might not nail in the right spot, you can see these lines that are on here. I had this piece turned around this way, and then on the inside with a marker I outlined all of my wood frame pieces where the wood frame is at. So when I turned it back around and stuck it on there, I knew where to send the nails through. And again, you won't see these imperfections because it will be covered up, and smoothed in with siding and whatnot. This is going to be really hard. I'm not excited about doing this roof. This little cupola witch's hat thingy that's going to go on here. If you look up some Victorian houses, you'll see what I'm talking about. You can make them like an actual witch's hat where they have like 3 different angle changes and then go up to a big steeple point. That would be really tall. This space would be effectively useless. I want to have it as another room. So I'm going to move the bottom in a little bit and make a very steep angle up to a flat roof section up here. I'm going to do the little railing around the top, and then I'll have little 45-degree slope coming off of that to kind of smooth it out. So I'll have like 2 angular transitions in there. So it's not going to be too hard. I don't feel like doing all that crazy math. I don't know if I can handle it. I don't have the patience. I might go angry and light it on fire, and I don't want to light it on fire. On some Victorian houses that I saw, the real life ones, they have little braces. I forget the name for those. It's like these. They do effectively the same purpose. Struts, they would support this corner, and they would have all kinds of ornate, ridiculous designs in it. I would like to have a drill press for doing those types of things, and I am looking into buying one. If anybody has any suggestions, I've been to Lowe's and Harbor Freight, and looked all over. I feel like as long as you're not getting a smaller, cheaper one, you're pretty well off. And if you're getting a huge stand-up one that is really hard to move around, which is not good because I'm in the Navy, oh well, I would like ideally a small one that goes on my bench top and has tons of power and cuts really straight and is nice, and that I can do metal and wood and all kinds of things. a good multi-purpose tool. But yeah, having a drill press, I'm going to look into it because I think it's going to be vital. And I'm going to have to save up my pennies to do that. Okay, so the cupola windows, another thing that I'm not really excited about, but I feel better about them than doing this part. I might actually do those first. I might do the cupola windows, which are windows that, you know, stick out, and there's a little slanty roof, little roof peak over top of each window. I'll probably do those first because that'll be a good, you know, experiment learning process. On this second floor, this one, there's going to be a double door, like glass door or something, French door, that's going to open out onto a little patio right there. And then there's going to be an awning that the patio is on top of that covers a porch. So I might actually work on all of these to get practice on doing these multi-faced angle changes and stuff. And the little roofs, I'll put a little roof over that patio too, a little cupola roofy dealy to protect that from rain, because it's a dollhouse and it shouldn't be in the rain. You can make them so they go in the rain, but I wouldn't. You know, it's probably going to fall apart very quickly. This piece, I'm debating on what I'm going to do there. I talked about it in my last video. I'll probably make a little like scraggly garden, because again, it's a Monster High Victorian dollhouse, which does fit the motif of Monster High, Victorian style. It's very old and creepy. I'm going to make some like creepy, spooky aspects about this. The paint job is going to be the Monster House kind of, you know, color scheme with the pinks and the purples and the blacks. But I'm going to throw in some like, you know, gray and white highlights and make it look aged. Put like a bat window in here. You know, make it kind of look like a haunted house, but not too creepy because it's supposed to be Monster High, and Monster High is supposed to be cute and creepy. So yeah, there's that. Those are the ideas that I'm doing. This is, you know, the basics of how to build it. We talked about the side pieces first. You want to build those. Don't put the windows in right away because most houses don't have windows on the side. And you stop the option of putting in a chimney where there should be one. Put on your big panels first. Make those nice and straight. Get yourself a cut at Lowe's on a panel saw. Make a panel saw yourself. Make a door board. Point of that is you want nice straight cuts. Put on your big flat pieces before your not big flat pieces. If you have intricate things, you know, work on those last to put it all together. Also on that note, if you have anything crazy like this roof is going to be, practice on your smaller things so you're not going to waste as much wood if you mess it up first. Do your little cupola windows in, you know, your little awnings in the porch, in the awning for your whole porch. You know, that is the best idea, to work on those smaller things first again. So if you mess those up, no big deal. You got the piece of wood out of your scrap that you were going to throw away anyways. And, you know, you're not destroying an entire like 2 foot by 4 foot panel because you miscalculated one angle. So I think that's all for this part of the video. We're going to talk about some more topics in other videos. Those will come very shortly, probably even right after this one.